Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Becker with RedmondMag.com, and I'd like to thank you all for joining today's webcast. Today, we're talking about navigating your hybrid workplace strategy with Microsoft Teams and BlueJeans. The event is sponsored by BlueJeans. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a couple of housekeeping details. BlueJeans has provided several resources which can be found on the right-hand side of your console, so please take a moment to check those out. Also, the webcast is being recorded, so keep an eye out for a link in your email to rewatch the presentation or share with a colleague. So for the next hour, we're going to have a conversation about what the future of work in this hybrid environment is going to look like and some of the best ways to enable collaboration and meetings in those settings. So for the agenda, I'll start the conversation with an overview of some brand new survey-based research that we did here for Redmond Magazine. And then we'll move into a roundtable discussion with our guests. So first, we've got Randy Chapman. Randy is a consultant, blogger, and podcaster, and a Microsoft MVP for Teams. So he specializes in telephony, meetings, and collaboration. He's a modern workplace architect and head of product at Symity. That's SYMITY.com. And he helps global customers with their digital transformation and UC journey. And in his spare time, he's a blogger and podcaster at ucstatus.com, a conference co-organizer, a YouTuber, and a public speaker. Our other guest today is Zach Boson. He's Vice President for Product Marketing and Communications at BlueJeans. He's responsible for shaping and executing the go-to-market strategy for BlueJeans' award-winning meetings platform. He was most recently Director of Solutions Marketing at Veritas, and he's also been an analyst in a previous life at the member-based advisory company CEB, which is now part of Gartner. So it's going to be a great discussion, and then there will be a Q&A. So keep your fingers limber to type in those questions in the questions. So the first thing, as I said, what I want to go through quickly is a preview of some research that we did. So the COVID-19 pandemic caused a massive shift in the way IT supported employees. And it happens that we just have a new research report from Redmond Intelligence that really makes it look like, the effects will last well beyond the current pandemic. So it's a great setup for our conversation today about hybrid work. Just real quickly about Redmond Intelligence. It's the research arm of the Converge 360 Media Group, which includes Redmond Mag. And we surveyed 436 IT professionals and managers in the first quarter of this year from organizations of all sizes, from small and medium-sized businesses all the way up to global enterprises. Most of the respondents were in the U.S. So I just want to go to the headline change here over on the left. It was in the percentage of employees at organizations who worked at home prior to the outbreak of the pandemic compared to how many were working at home nearly a year later. So prior to the outbreak, 71% of respondents said that 80% or more of their workforce was in an office. So I know that's a lot of percentages in one thing, but in other words, at the vast majority of organizations, at least 4 out of 5 employees worked in the office. So fast forward to now, during the pandemic, and the numbers are completely flipped. So you've got only 19% of respondents still had at least 4 out of 5 employees in the office. And I know the numbers there on the right in the donut are pretty small, but I just want to point you to that sort of southeast edge of the donut there. It's like a light blue or aqua color, and that's the percentage of companies where 91 to 100% of their workers are at home now, and that's almost 28%, which is just, I don't know, it's like a mind-boggling number. If you came out with that number in 2018 or 2019, it would be crazy. IT managers and professionals are also expecting the effects of that headlong rush to remote work to sort of echo into the future. So I want to look at one thing first. A plurality of 35% expected that if vaccines and other methods get the pandemic under control, they'd bring some workers back, leave others at home, and rely more on flexible shared workspaces. That was just like, that's the biggest group there where it's really going to be, kind of playing it by ear and bringing a lot of people back. And we'll go into some of those other numbers a little bit more in a minute. But the other one was that nearly a third expect physical office space to decline at their organizations in the future. In about a quarter, expect a reduction in on-premises data center capacity as well, which is a little bit outside the scope of what we're talking about today, but I also found it interesting. But I'll leave this slide up because while the organizations, that are looking to shake things up make up a sizable group, there are a lot of organizations that anticipate getting back to the way things were. They kind of want to snap back, So on various questions, 30% told us that they'd be bringing most workers who were previously in the office back to the office. 50% plan to keep office space the same or increase it, which is which you can see here. And in 50%, a couple of them add up. The biggest one is keeping the office space the same. Some were adding some. And then 48% wanted to maintain or increase on-premises data center capacity. But what's also interesting is just there's a lot of uncertainty. So if you're not sure what you're going to do, you're far from alone. On the office space question, 19% didn't know or they hadn't decided what they were going to do. On the data center sizing question, 27% hadn't decided. And I'll just give an anecdote from my own company, and maybe I'm speaking a little bit out of school because we had a company meeting about this yesterday, but I've been in a home office for 23 years. So there's a lot of us, at my company at 1105 Media who are at home. But then, we've got one office where, they were looking at the lease and they decided not to renew. So all those employees, in one city, it was working out really well with them all at home. So they're gonna stay home and shut down that office. The rest of the company in the larger offices, they'll be coming back, in July. We've got a firm date for them to come back. So it's a real mix, and I think it's a good example of what a lot of people were reporting in our survey here, which is just that it's a very mixed bag, but it's sort of bending toward a new equilibrium with a lot more people remote than before. Nothing absolute one way or the other, but kind of a shift. And then one last thing that I wanted to show you before we get on to our panel discussion here with Zach and Randy, but if there was any doubt about virtual meetings and video conferencing and how important they've become. This is sort of a master of the obvious question, but it's interesting. I think this slide puts it to rest. So we asked what technologies became more important as your organization responded to the pandemic, and clearly the top item is virtual meeting and video conferencing. Some of the other top ones you would expect: VPN, upgraded laptops, remote support, et cetera. But virtual meeting and video conferencing obviously is a huge one. So with that, I want to move on to our panel discussion and bring in Zach and Randy. Guys, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So we all talk about hybrid workplace a lot. And it's always good to level set in this sort of conversation. So maybe Randy, I'll go to you first. Can you give me a specific definition of the hybrid workplace from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the numbers that you showed were no real surprise. The only one big surprise was that 71% were in offices before the pandemic, and I thought it would be a lot higher, particularly in the U.S. I know a lot of people that do work from home, as a thing. You said 23 years. Me, myself, I'm kind of 7 or 8 years now. And I know a lot of other people, that are similar to me in their job roles that work from home or, full-time or at least part-time. So that mm-hmm. number really surprised me. But really hybrid is just that, you're not permanently based necessarily at any one location. You are, I guess, transient, a little bit nomad. You could be in an office, you could be at a customer site, you could be at home, you could be, before the pandemic, I was all over the place. I had conference calls and Teams meetings and in train stations, plane, not actually on the plane, but sitting there waiting for the actual the gate to call and stuff. So hybrid is just being everywhere really, and just working wherever you happen to be. That's my kind of takeaway from it.
Great, Zach.
Yeah,
what's your definition?
I think it's it's less about the physical aspect and more about the mindset. And I think it's about a mindset that embraces flexibility. And so historically, from a manager's perspective, the orientation is, a legacy approach is if my people are, they're in the office, they're working. And so I think moving more to a hybrid model is about embracing that flexibility and having that trust that everyone has gained over the past year. And, as people start to think, hey, there's aspects to the office that are advantageous, I want to take advantage of those, that we don't retreat back to the legacy mindset, which is, if we have a couple people in the office, everyone needs to be in the office. We need to adapt how we think about where work gets done. And so I think a lot of the kind of questions people have is like, how do we make that shift? How do we make that pivot into that mindset where flexibility kind of reigns supreme, and we adopt that throughout all the different aspects of our business and how we get work done. And so I think hybrid to me really is that kind of, flipping the script on where work gets done and how we think about how work gets done.
Great.
Yeah.
So as far as, some of the trends that you're anticipating that organizations are going to be facing as we head into the summer, maybe Zach, I'll come back to you on that one. What do you see coming?
Well, fingers crossed, people feel, comfortable going back into offices to a certain degree. That's what I'm really hopeful for. I think that what we're going to see is kind of this evolution of kind of policies being set. And I think you have some of the larger tech companies who are trying to get out there and say, hey, our folks are going to be mandated to come in the office 3 days a week. And then you have other companies who are saying, hey, we're going to leave it up to the individual management teams to make decisions about, the type of kind of requirements we're going to have. And then you have some companies, maybe those in the financial services sector, who are saying, hey, everyone's coming back in just like beforehand. So I think one of the top trends that it'll be important to pay attention to is, are those policies being set? Is confidence kind of growing that we need to have policies in place? I think one of the challenges is that if organizational leaders say we're not going to set a policy, then it's going to be very ambiguous. And I think that, leaders need to provide some kind of guidance towards what the expectation is, so kind of employees don't feel like they're out in the lurch. Is it okay for me to stay working from home for a couple of days? Do I need to go in the office? Is there a big team meeting? So I think one of the interesting trends to watch is the evolution of those policies, and once they're kind of solidified, then the adoption of them. So I think that's one critical one that I'm watching, and then another one is just kind of the evolution of the office space. And I think if you think about offices that we're all familiar with, there's kind of workstations that have been assigned to people in a traditional office, and you have conference rooms. Maybe you have like a break space, lunch space, things like that. Well, if kind of organizations want to bring people back into the office for specific activities that are maybe more collaborative, how are we going to be redesigning those spaces? How are we going to be thinking about the best work that can happen in those spaces? How do we technology enable those spaces? And see what kind of cool new ideas and innovations are going to be coming out of kind of the pandemic, where people are excited to get back together. But how are you going to create those environments to kind of be attractive to people to come into the office? Because everyone likes working from home. Everyone likes not having to commute. So it'll be interesting to see then how not only the policy gets set, but then how organizations adapt their office space to be more welcoming to whatever this next generation of work looks like.
Interesting. Yeah. Randy, anything to add on that? Any trends that you're anticipating?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the mindset. Obviously, you got two mindsets. You got mindset of the employer, who always had that expectation that you're in the office. I can see you, therefore you're productive and busy. And you got the mindset of the employee, who was probably sent home for the first time. And those numbers that you showed, 19% are still in the office, and I guess those are the people that they have to be because of whatever they do. The function they do just can't be done remotely or from home. So, all these people have to try and find a place in their house to work and probably adapt their whole lives. Sometimes when their kids are sent home, they become the teacher as well as an employee of a company and all that sort of thing. So, Yeah, it's interesting because, here in the UK, it's a little different to the US. The government said it's lockdown, and therefore everybody's locked down. All the shops are shut, all the buildings are shut. Everybody was sent home, and everybody had to there was no argument. You just had to go home. Restaurants and things like that are the exception to that, but particularly those that can do takeaways. But everything else was shut, and really nobody had a choice. And for the last, I'd say, 6 months, everybody's been working on working on strategies to try and bring people back to the office safely. None of them are well, as far as I could tell, none of them are going back to the old ways of, this is Zach's desk over here in the corner. That's where Zach has always sat. It's going to be a case of now we have, 400 desks in this building because of social distancing. We need to have that or even third that and really try and identify the spaces we can allow people to safely return, and also then adapt the technology to find a desk to report that you're free of COVID and things like that. Maybe you've had a test recently, you don't have a fever when you're going in, adhering to T's and C's and things, and then actually safely going back in. And every business I've spoken to is also reducing the amount of time they're allowing people to come back to the office. Some are, making it as little as 1 to 2 days. You're not allowed to come into the office for more than 1 to 2 days in a given week. And even then, they're even restricting the amount of time. You're only allowed, for 8 hours, unless you have some specific thing. So everybody's adapting to it, not just the employer, the employee, the whole workspace, as you said, is adapting. And, in the meeting spaces business where I work at Simity, there's businesses that are asking for meetings and trying to help, to ask for help actually designing the hybrid meeting room, to try and take spaces that weren't meeting rooms before, make them meeting rooms, maximize the effort, to try and to make sure that they can include people that happen to be in the office and everybody that's at home and remote, and trying to bring everybody together. So things like, the Magic Whiteboard will really come back to fray for Teams rooms, and just, all the AV is just going to be stepped up. It's a really busy time in the meeting spaces business. And, I think even CVI technologies such as BlueJeans could potentially, sort of be a big game changer there as well, bringing, not just your employees that use the same system as you, but also bringing people that are using whatever, so everybody can meet safely. It's really interesting.
That's a great point. And I wonder if you could give us a quick definition of CVI, just for those of us who aren't in the space every day.
Okay, I can take
that.
So,
one. Or you can take it.
That. Yeah, sure,
no, you're the MVP. You can do it.
Yeah. So it's Cloud Video Interop, or CVI. Effectively, what that means is it's I call it a virtual meeting room or a virtual meeting space that is there to translate all the different meeting platforms into a common platform. Not everybody's using Teams, unfortunately. If you're not, go get Teams. But, there's people out there with legacy systems. I'll call them legacy systems. Some people say, no, it's current systems. It's Cisco, or it's Aruba, or it's, whatever. And they all need to be able to meet sometimes. And, it means that you can get your own legacy equipment, or invite your customers with their own legacy equipment into your Teams meetings and meet in a common ground. And it's a great technology. Zach, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
yeah,
no,
Zach.
I would it's a great job. Cloud Video Interop really is, and I think Randy's talking about those kind of standards-based endpoints, H.323 and SIP-based endpoints. There's millions of them out in the world, and they need to connect to Microsoft Teams meetings. And so Cloud Video Interop is that technology, that middleware that stitches together those legacy endpoints and allows them to join those Teams meetings. And very critical. Teams adoption is something unlike we've ever seen, and I think the pandemic has driven that, but also just all of the functionality that's built into that productivity hub. And so one of the interesting topics is everyone that is a Teams user today, but using it from home, when those folks do come back into the office, you want to ensure that your workspaces are enabled to maintain that continuity. Because if that's the way everyone has now adapted, you don't want to take that away from people. You want to help enable that, whether they're at home or in the office. And I think that's central to this conversation about hybrid is how do you create that continuity? How do you create that consistency? And if people feel like they're being more productive, well, the last thing a business wants to do is take away, those productivity gains. And so I think there's some interesting questions there.
Right. And both of you mentioned something that really piqued my interest, which is, what do you see being so close to the space as far as, in office space construction? What's going on right now in terms of, people, re-architecting their offices or getting new spaces? Is it, just fewer desks farther, spaced farther apart and sort of traditional conference rooms? Are there new types of rooms that are coming up, or those things that you think are going to develop over the next few years and haven't really emerged yet? Like, what's the space look like?
That's a great question. Sort of the traditional meeting room is still, very much king, all the way from, small round tables or even just, video booths, kind of things for just getting some privacy and doing a video meeting, all the way through to large boardrooms or multi-use spaces where you open up a wall and it becomes an even bigger space. There was one we did for a very large UK government customer that was actually creating an environment so that they could meet safely in the same building in two different rooms. And it was interview rooms. So effectively, we created two different video booths that were securely connected together, tamper-proof so that that nothing untoward could happen, and absolutely bulletproof in terms of the technology to make sure that it actually worked first time every time. And that was a massive success. They needed a way to get the interviewers and the interviewees to meet together without actually meeting, in the same location, so they could do it safely. That was, a real game changer, I think.
Huh.
That's one example of a strange new kind of space that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
One of the
and Zach, what about on your side? Are you guys seeing anything in terms of orders or
I think it's still a little bit early days, at least from our perspective. I think on more of the software side, but I think what I've kind of just seen across the industry is when you think of one of the areas where we've been impacted as a business, obviously, is we used to go to a lot of trade shows, a lot of conferences, and those things have all become virtual events. Customer visits, right? Actually bringing your products to go and show to the customer, bring your customers on site. All of that has been disrupted. And so I think one of the possible evolutionary elements we'll see within office spaces is how do you create showrooms that are beneficial for customers coming on site, but also optimized for kind of virtual kind of customer visits. And I think there's some really interesting opportunities to transform that current office space to different use cases. I mean, I think some larger organizations have, they have learning and development areas, which are more classroom based. I think you could see that evolution happening where learning and development will have its own space with its own unique set of technology to ensure that you might not need to bring 100 folks on site for kind of new hire training or sales kickoff, things like that. And so how can you think about leveraging that existing office space, which now you're not going to have as many designated workstations, and thinking about the use cases and thinking about how you can apply technology to help really emphasize those learnings and the things that you're trying to highlight in the virtual setting as well as the physical setting. So, I think it is more of a pivot we're going to see to doing some discovery. And I think, facilities managers have always been thinking about, well, what is the type of work that these employees need to get done? I think we're going to see that evolve to the next degree, which is, okay, how can we make these spaces even more specialized to really help our teams get the most when they're either in the office or when they're dialing in to a more virtual experience? So I think there's a lot of work to be done there, but getting a little bit more granular I think is probably one of the directions we'll see.
Yeah,
gotcha.
A lot of little little spaces that weren't meeting areas that are just popping up all over the place. There's always been this, if you look in, sort of big multi-use spaces, sometimes there's furniture that's designed to acoustically shield stuff. You got two sofas with 6-foot backs and kind of really wrap around stuff to try and keep the sound in those areas. Well, these spaces are becoming audio and video enabled in a lot of cases as well. Creating this as you said, we're just having the desks or reducing the number of desks, making them farther apart. That's one way. They're all hot desk spaces rather than Scott's desk and so-and-so's. But also these other meeting spaces that just weren't there before are all just popping up out of the blue now.
And I think one other
Yeah.
point on that was what's interesting is, traditionally, when you think of conference room systems for video conferencing, they're kind of these more large, cumbersome, kind of multi-component. And the sheer innovation that we've seen over the past year, where you have smaller devices, all-in-one devices that have both audio and video capabilities that are more plug and play. I mean, these things are designed so that if you need to outfit an entire office space to make it video connected, it's going to be as easy as snapping your fingers. And that technology it's not just about having the hardware, but some of just the software elements of what those devices are doing in terms of the audio fencing, in terms of kind of the intelligent scene framing. I mean, it's going to be awesome. I think the future of our audio video experiences, when we have kind of this technology built up throughout the workspaces, it's gonna provide a very different experience than everyone just going into one conference room and using the remote control to try to join a meeting. We're going to see, I think, in the next few years, some pretty cool innovation.
Yeah, definitely agree there.
So, Randy, as a Microsoft MVP, what are you hearing from IT admins as they're considering the next phase of using Microsoft Teams for collaboration?
So the first consideration when everybody got sent home was, oh crap, my PBX or telephone system in the office. If the people just take their phone home, it isn't going to work. They're going to plug it in, and it's just not going to connect to anything. So they all needed a way to work from home effectively using the same numbers they already had. A lot of them used call diverts as a temporary measure, but we saw projects that were slated to take a year being done in 15 weeks. That kind of thing. They had to accelerate, and even quicker. There was one for a government agency that we spoke to on the Monday. They placed the order on the Wednesday, and they needed to be up and running by the following Monday. It didn't happen. It took a couple of weeks after that, but we moved mountains, and they moved mountains to make sure everything worked and got in. So so IT is trying to shoehorn in a technology that they were already using and voice enabling it, and they're reaping the benefits from it. The rest of it is, using other facilities, other third-party services, or actually making use of all the technology in Microsoft 365, Power Apps and Power, sort of the Power Platform to try and build, line of business apps that actually help return to the office safely. Sort of booking a desk, that kind of thing. I mean, we developed one internally for a couple of companies that were rolling out. And, it started with, just find a desk from a list right through to now it's, actually helping the people actually get back into the office safely and self-certify, agreeing to terms and conditions, as I said before, and everything in between, really. So it's, having to adapt to all that technology is incredible. And also just using the technologies built into Teams rooms in general. So, the camera technology is catching up in a big way. They all have brains, the cameras themselves, so they can count the people in the office and actually alert when there's, too many people in a space, so you can set that limit. So if you've got a 12-person boardroom that really during, social distancing can only take 6, then you want to be assured that everybody's going to be safe in that, and actually alert somebody, to make sure that everybody's safe in the whole thing. So there's so many different things that are coming that are helping things along, and these are technologies that just weren't even conceived of before the pandemic, and they've just come to fruition. It just popped up out of nowhere, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I'm interested in the reaction of both of you. Being heavily involved in the Teams world. Just yesterday, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, during the earnings call, said that there were now 145 million daily active users of Teams, and I think that was up from, I don't know what it was in November.
It was 115 million. I think it was September,
like in October. Yeah. But even like the previous year, the numbers were
75,
19 million or something, like in 19 in the summer, in 2019, before the pandemic. It's just, it's been such an explosion. Just any reactions to, to the adoption and sort of like where you're seeing the platform compared to what you had hoped that it would be a couple of years ago?
Yeah, when you think back, Teams is only 4 years old. We're 4 and a bit now. I think it was in private preview for a little while, and then public preview for a couple of months before it went GA. And when it went GA, it really didn't do a lot. It was, there was promise. Obviously, it could do, it was promised that it could do something. And over time, it's, they've added, something like 1,000 features over that space of time. So the amount of technology and innovation that's gone into it is, I guess it had to. They released what they call the MVP, or the minimum viable product, to the world, and everybody saw some promise in it and kind of went along for the journey. And it started to grow really steadily anyway. But then, you just said 19 million becomes 40 million, 40 million becomes 75 million at the beginning of last year. And this is, just before all the lockdowns and the pandemics. And the fact that it's doubled in usage in that 1 year period is just testament to, everybody's, I say everybody, a lot of people have Microsoft 365 licensing, and Teams is just one of those things that bundled in with it. So it's one of those no-brainers. Do you want to pay for your chat platform? Do you want to pay for your meetings platform? Do you want to pay for your telephone system? Or do you just want to use something you already own, voice enable it, and get rid of all that other legacy stuff? And that's just, what people have done out of necessity, but also just people wanted to do it anyway. But you think about another use case, it's not just people in an office, it's education. Education has helped Teams become, as big as it is. Both my daughters were homeschooling for, 2 different lockdowns or 3 different lockdowns. And for both of them, they were using Teams for their school lessons and stuff. And I thought it was, really, really good. Imagine a teacher or an IT person at a school, very underfunded, very small school with perhaps 600 students, trying to figure out how to navigate and get Teams into, all the classes for all the different years and all that kind of stuff. So that, sort of shout out to all the educators out there that have actually just adapted and got this stuff moving with the help potentially of, IT companies or UC companies and things like that. But just, the growth is good for good reason, and also out of necessity. It's really good to see the growth.
I think, personally, I feel it's a testament to kind of the customer responsiveness. If you look at the sheer innovation, Randy mentioned it, maybe it's 1,000 features that have come out, and it's those impactful features and like true innovation that I think has excited the customer base. And as someone who's at a competitive video conferencing solution, it is just incredible to see how they've been able to accomplish so much, and their dedication to delivering some of those really helpful features. Things like Together Mode, which I think are just very innovative but incredibly useful in times like this, where people are searching for different ways to engage with one another and feel connected. And so I think it's been the feature development, but also I've also been impressed in some of the what I'd call thought leadership that Microsoft has also introduced in terms of meeting fatigue. They just published a really interesting study where they put sensors on people's brains, and they were looking at the impact of having breaks in between meetings. And when those of us are in meetings back to back to back, and you never have a chance to take a breath, well, that actually increases stress and anxiety. And they were able to prove that based on some of the behavioral science research they were doing. And so they're taking that, and then they're building features to actually drive Outlook to shorten meetings and create breaks to help people be more productive. So it's like, they've done a lot in terms of getting the product where it needs to be, so it's good enough. But even better than that, it's better than good enough, and they're using those insights to create new pathways for innovation. And so, I mean, the growth has been tremendous. I think the industry consolidation leads to a chunk of that, but if people want to use it. And so you could have people being forced to use it, but there's shadow IT everywhere. But in this case, we're seeing continued growth. I think, we had seen that 115 million number a couple months back, and we hadn't seen a report out. So to continue to see that kind of linear growth, I think it's a testament to what the team's done. And, you're kind of in awe, quite honestly, standing back and saying, that's a lot of people using that product, and it's just 4 years old. So exciting to see, but also exciting to kind of like participate in the conversation, of course.
Yeah, just imagine as well that Microsoft, had no idea the growth was going to happen. So they scaled the platform based on what they thought the usage might be, and they've had to increase capacity, again and again and again and again. And not only are they just increasing capacity to react to those numbers, they're also increasing the capacity to go way beyond it. So doing, a 20,000 person webinar in Teams is going to be possible soon. That's staggering, the amount. And really, I believe they could actually go further than that. There's just the number they've tested it up to try and figure out the scale. And it's not just one webinar. These are, 145 million daily active users. How many of those 20,000 user webinars could there be at any one time around the planet? So shout out to Microsoft for actually not only just innovating and keeping ahead of the curve in terms of features, things like the meeting, sort of the 5-minute warning. I love that one. The 5-minute countdown. Your meeting is going to end in 5 minutes, and it's just this visual warning that says, right, I'm going to go and have a break in a minute, or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, on the topic of the features, so let's talk a little bit about the aspects of the collaboration tech stack that IT admins need to consider as they're thinking of a hybrid workforce. And Randy, maybe you could talk about some of the Microsoft Teams features, and then Zach, maybe you could follow up with some of the conference rooms and office spaces kinds of considerations. But so I'll turn over to Randy first on that one.
So if you think about the 4 main pillars of Microsoft Teams, you got chat, you've got video, you've got calling, whether it's internal calling or actual telephony, phoning a mobile number or something, and then you've got what we call collaboration. Collaboration is a much bigger piece than the other 3. The other 3 is, there's chat platforms all over the place, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and Skype, of course, and lots of others besides. There's lots of telephony platforms, lots of meeting platforms, BlueJeans notwithstanding. And then, of course, the collaboration stack also has some chat functionality inside of Teams and channels. And, for that kind of collaboration, it's more of a, rather than 1-to-1 or 1 to a couple, it's 1 to many. It could be an org-wide team. It could be a team working on a specific project. It could be, made up of people internal to the business, but also business guests outside. It could be your customer, your supplier. It could be third-party consultants or anything and everything in between. So it's really the collaboration space is this, almost war room, if you like, for collaborating on a specific subject. So that's just the conversations tab, and then you've got files and file access. So, you think about the way we used to access files. It was a file server in the corner. Eventually that evolved into online storage or cloud storage. And of course you've got SharePoint and other online, data repositories that also have more in them, so intranet type places that also became a place to store files. Well, with Teams, the files are there, and you don't really have to think about where they are. They're just there. They happen to be in SharePoint. They happen to be, in OneDrive if you're using personal files in your chats and things. So there's all that. And then, of course, you've got the apps and the connectors. So connectors could be, a connector to a Twitter feed. It could be a connector to another line of business app that happens to have developed something that lives or that can live and integrate with Teams. and then of course you just got apps themselves. So apps could be things like, attendant consoles. That could be, other meeting platforms. It could be ways to access a YouTube video or do a search for something, or even just, integrating with third-party services like Trello to do project management and stuff. So, it's really this hub for teamwork, as they call it. It's a very cliched term, but it is that. And I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say the single pane of glass, but it is that kind of that rectangle with which you look to do your work. Say rectangle, unless you've got a monitor that's absolutely square, it's going to be a rectangle. So I'll just in case everybody's throwing stuff at the chat and the Q&A. The top considerations really is about making sure that it works, making sure that people can actually collaborate and with each other, but also then just do it safely. So you think about, everybody in an office, you can see them. You're not necessarily walking around looking at everybody's screen to make sure they're doing things responsibly, but using technologies that are built in. Data loss prevention is one, that actually helps protect your intellectual property, not just the files, but the things you say. Being able to put a filter on the chats to make sure that you don't say something out of turn, or to flag something if somebody says Project Redbook or something like that, Redstone, sort of Born Identity type stuff, and alerting the people that need to know that they're actually talking about that stuff. But also then just protecting, for one is shadow IT, but also just making sure that the security that's built into the Office stack can also be leveraged inside a team, so that you can't just screenshot something and send it out, or you can't just copy something to a cloud storage or a thumb drive or something and actually get it out the building, and that leaks don't happen. There's a lot of technologies built into the background that you can actually leverage to protect the business from all sorts of things, not least of which the internal staff, who are probably one of the weakest links. So that's a massive consideration. We call it governance and just security in general. So I think that's the biggest one. And as I said, the secondary one is just making sure everybody can connect. And that's not just in an office, resilient internet connections, that sort of thing. But imagine going home, not everybody has very, very fast broadband to where they are. I know there was actually a guy that I work with that is on satellite broadband because that's what he can get where he's at. Very slow satellite broadband, and he can't get 5G or anything. I think he's stuck on 4G. So his internet connection is just about good enough, but he's always looking to technologies to try to increase that. But he still participates, where he can. That's great to see. So connecting to technology, making sure it can be done safely and securely, I think, are the two main considerations. For the collaboration in general.
Great. And Zach, on the conference rooms and sort of office spaces side of those IT admins considerations.
I would pick up on the same theme that Randy was laying down, which is around connectivity, ease of use, ensuring that when you have employees who may not be as familiar with the technology, that they're not going to struggle with it when they're in the conference room trying to join a meeting. It can be a high stress event. You're coming in, you might be running a minute late. The last thing you want to do is fumble around with remotes, plugging in cables, not being able to join the meeting, wasting everyone's time. And so when thinking about that end user experience, when thinking about the expectation, kind of like the consumerization of kind of IT, like those experiences in the conference room need to reflect experiences that we use in the rest of our day-to-day kind of experiences. So I think ensuring that you've got your calendars all synced up, so it's easy to book a conference room space. That's kind of a no-brainer. But then also having kind of a two-tablet experience where you have kind of the outside of the room, which is highlighting whether a meeting is available, or meeting room's available, whether someone's in a meeting, really just kind of a visual indicator to understand, hey, is this a meeting space I can use, especially with the proliferation of meeting spaces that we're going to see in the office. It's going to be really important that you just have a good sense as an IT administrator, like that you're providing solutions that are available or not available, and that there's easy visual indicators behind that. And then within the conference room itself, I think there's, as we previously mentioned, there's a lot of existing hardware that's out there. You want to make sure that that is able to connect to your Microsoft Teams meetings. If you have huddle spaces or meeting spaces that aren't currently video enabled, you need to think through how do you bring the right technology into each of those specific spaces that satisfies the appropriate requirements. And then, another element that Randy mentioned earlier was kind of the magic whiteboard. I think that there's going to be kind of this interesting, I know I personally feel it. I wish I had a whiteboard here at home. I wish I had a whiteboard that would easily kind of like transfer into the digital realm. So I do think, especially as you have some people back in the office, people not in the office, how are you going to be able to leverage those physical assets and digitize them? So thinking through some of that, those peripheral components, I think will be important. I don't think, you don't need to go crazy and outfit every room to the nines. You need to be diligent and focus on what each meeting space will require for the type of work that is expected there, and just make the right decisions for the meeting space. So I think we'll see a lot of that start to come together as these conference spaces and meeting spaces begin to be outfitted.
Yeah, and Zach, I guess as a follow-up on that, how do companies ensure that their offices are ready with Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that it's one of the important things to do within Microsoft Teams is kind of understand the usage. And, I think it would be really important that as you start to bring folks back into the office, I mean, you're going to try to prepare yourself as much as you possibly can. And then the doors are going to open, employees are going to start coming back, and you'll get a real sense. So looking at some of those utilization metrics, understanding how many meetings are taking place, understanding, like Randy said, you've got some of those analytics within the video conferencing systems themselves that will tell you how many people are in rooms, ensuring that you're following the right safety protocols, just really keeping a good eye on performance. And, are some of those metrics that you were seeing previously in terms of adoption, how are those shifting? That's going to be, I think, one key indicator. And then the second key indicator for any IT person, of course, is how many times are we getting support tickets throughout the day? Is the technology working as intended, or are people having a hard time figuring it out? And so I think it's one of those things where you're going to prepare for the work that you expect, and then it's going to change. This, once again, this is all about flexibility. This is the dynamicism of kind of the next generation of work. But I don't think turning a blind eye to it, not managing it, is going to have the best outcomes. I think one of the really interesting other takeaways that I saw from a recent Microsoft piece of research is that, not only do employees expect flexibility, I think, going forward, but there's also something like 40% of employees that are thinking about changing jobs in the next year. And I think like the pandemic has created this crazy time where everyone's kind of revisiting, hey, is this the job that I want to do going forward? And I think that what IT does to prepare the workspace for successful collaboration outcomes, for having kind of the right types of work experiences in the office, I think that like you're going to have a better outcome when it comes to retention. And so it's really important now that you think about the outcomes that you're trying to drive are not only oriented around productivity and ensuring that on-site and remote employees are productive, but it's how are we building our workspace to retain those employees? Because people are kind of poking their head up right now and trying to figure out what's next. And if you have good, strong talent, you don't necessarily want them to walk out the door because your organization isn't adapting a lockstep. So I thought that was a really interesting finding, but I think it has important implications for how you think about outfitting your office going forward.
I think that's a really important point. I was reading an article the other day about sort of some managers expecting a snapback situation where they're going to, have everybody back in the office and be monitoring who's working, by seeing their seeing them in their seats. There was a quote in there about, corporations have 100% of the power, but I think you're raising a really important point, is that a lot of people are going to be looking around, and there are going to be a lot more companies that are open to working in the way that, workers have come to find that they kind of like, and they can work anywhere, for those employers. So yeah, great points. So maybe I'll direct this one to Randy first. But how would an organization decide on whether to deploy new hardware or use CVI to use existing rooms?
That's a great question. So I guess it depends on budget for the start. Think about traditional legacy SIP and H323 rooms. Some of these rooms and systems that were there were tens, hundreds of thousands, back in the day, and the considerations you had to connect to ISDN gateways and modems to try and do point-to-point links and all kinds of other stuff that really we don't need to mess with now. And you usually want, when you buy a piece of technology, you want to sweat that asset for as long as you can to try and maximize the return on investment. So you're not going to just throw away something that costs you, sort of many tens of thousands overnight. So in those kind of cases where you do need to sweat that, maybe you're still paying it off, or maybe you just don't want to do that, then technologies like CVI become your best friend, really. It means that, for the spaces that maybe you didn't have that big an investment in, or for key rooms where you do need to make sure that it's, maximizing on the team side and making it simple, you can upgrade those rooms. But those other spaces that, maybe aren't as important, or you just, as I said, you just don't want to give them up, then CVI becomes that lifeline. And I always say, even if you don't use CVI for bringing your own legacy equipment in, always have some in the bank for that eventuality that, you don't know what your customers are going to join your meeting with. If they want to sit in their boardroom with their Cisco or their something else, let them, and show them that as a benefit. You're thinking about not only your employees and everybody else, but you're thinking about your customers, your partners, and that sort of thing. So just always have some CVI in the bank. And, it's obvious when you send out a Teams meeting invite, it always has that, join Teams meeting here, maybe a phone number below that. And below that is, here's a friendly link for getting in no matter what you've got. And I'm extending that to you as a benefit. So, yeah, you don't have to go hog wild. Somebody used the term, you don't have to go hog wild when it comes to all this technology in your rooms. By all means, if you do need to, there's the technology that's available is absolutely incredible, that you can bring in ceiling tile mics and cameras that follow you around as you walk around the space and pace up and down and all that kind of stuff. But and even with all that, you can make it simple. You walk in, press join, and you're in. And that's the key. Nobody's fumbling with a remote. Nobody's grabbing cables and plugging it into something, figuring out what source the TV has to be on and all that kind of stuff. Everything has to be geared to be simple, whether it's, using your existing kit into a Teams meeting, or whether you're using, team-specific hardware, or whether you're just, using it as a bring your own space to just present something from a supplier's laptop on the screen in the room. It just needs to be really, really simple.
Zach, anything to add to that?
I think Randy nailed it. What I would say is, some of that legacy hardware that organizations do have sitting around, the cameras are great. The audio, generally speaking, is top notch. And so just because maybe it's not the latest and greatest doesn't mean it's still not a very high performance system. Some of these systems are $10,000, if not more. And so I would really think about how can you maximize the utility of those devices, but also, with a forward looking eye, where can you maybe bring in some of those Microsoft Team rooms to help complement those existing systems that you have. So, but no, great job, Randy. That was an awesome response.
Pleasure.
Great. Well, let's jump over to some questions from the audience. I guess the first thing I should point out is that Andy appreciated Randy, your shout out to Education IT and what an amazing job they did with Teams over the last year. We've got another question here. For small business, what's the best way to make sure the office is ready? We're trying to prioritize different projects. Any prioritization guidance as we try to bring people to the office? Zach, I'll direct that to you. Any thoughts on that one?
So I think that, once again, it kind of ties back to the type of work that needs to get done. And I'd say that if the type of work that needs to get done is more collaborative in nature, I would start to think through what the game plan looks like to bring folks back, and ensuring that you've got not only kind of the right safety measures to keep everyone safe and protected, but also thinking through the technology stack to make sure that you can have some folks, on site and some folks remotely. So, I guess I would revert back to just thinking through what are we trying to accomplish. I think, as Randy said, which was interesting, is that there's some restrictions in place where teams are coming on site, but they're not there for 5 days a week. They're there for maybe an hour at a time. So just really having a disciplined plan to what are we going to accomplish in that time. Let's make sure that if we need to have technology built in to support us during that point in time, let's have that. But let's not overthink it. Let's try to take maybe just some small steps to get us back into a place where everyone's feeling comfortable, going to be productive, and then move forward from that. So I guess that would be my guidance.
Okay, super. All right. Well, I just wanted to move to, there's a call to action slide. And Zach, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to say about that one, about what's on there.
Sure. So for those folks who have joined us today who are interested in learning a little bit more about CVI, about Cloud Video Interop, we do offer the BlueJeans Gateway for Microsoft Teams. There's a couple of different ways that you can actually experience the BlueJeans Gateway. We have a free 30-day trial where you can connect your room systems and have as many meetings as you'd like for those 30 days. If you aren't ready to take that step, we have something called a test drive where effectively we'll send your conference room system an invite to join a 4-hour exploding meeting, but at least it's a proof point that shows that we can connect to 19,000 different room system configurations, and you'll get that legacy SIP or H.323 endpoint to connect to a Teams meeting. And just to learn more, we've got some information there in terms of our website and some of the collateral and other information that everyone can check out. And if you do have a specific question around our Cloud Video Interop solution, feel free to reach out to us through that link, and we'll get back to you and help you on your journey.
Very cool. What's an exploding meeting then? Is it?
So it's really just a 4-hour meeting, where we are going to send a calendar invitation. It's good for 4 hours for you to join from any really endpoint that you add to the meeting invitation, and then that 4-hour window closed. We call it an exploding meeting because it's kind of time bound, but it's a great way to join
like the old spy
Teams
messages.
meeting. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like Inspector Gadget, where it explodes.
Yep.
So it makes it a little more fun. So it's kind of to dip your toes, and then if you want to go all in, the free trial, and everything is accessible online. There's a 4-step wizard, super easy to get going. It's a great experience.
Super. Well, we're up on time, so just want to see if you guys have any sort of closing thoughts. And Randy, I'll go to you first, and then Zach second.
Closing thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I'd say follow the guidance in your local vicinity. Do make sure you do things safely. Make sure you do things responsibly. Get your vaccination if that's your thing. Wear a mask. I'd say definitely, without question, wear a mask wherever you happen to be. We're not out of the woodworks, and we're not going to be for probably a little while. But do everything as best you can. If you are going back into the office, baby steps, as you said, but just think about why you need to be there, why everybody else needs to be there, and fit things out in a way that helps really everybody, and it can be done responsibly. And then just as they said on, just be good to each other, isn't it? Or be excellent to each other, isn't it? Bill and Ted, there you go.
Bill and Ted, be excellent. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
I would echo that. I would echo the Bill and Ted comment, and I'd also say, think about the people. Think about the people before the technology, and think about how your plan is going to be about supporting your employees and understanding the type of work that they're hoping to get done, and then using that as a roadmap to build out kind of the technology infrastructure that you're required. But I think if we start with the people as we enter this kind of next generation of hybrid work, we're going to be more successful than if we just try to throw a bunch of tools and technology at it. So but be excellent to each other.
Well, that's a great place to end it. Both of you guys focusing on the people and be excellent to each other. So Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Randy, for being with us today. It was really good stuff.
My pleasure.
And also want to thank the audience for attending. And this webcast was sponsored by Blue Jeans and presented by Redmond Mag. Have an excellent day. Take care.